Welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. Adam Kaplan is somebody I've known since very early on in my adventure into doing media stuff in senior living. He's one of the people who has always been one of my heroes, who's just been very thoughtful and leading maybe the next generation, perhaps, of what senior living will be. So, Adam, I'm really excited. We're going to start with our intro, and then we will have some conversation.
Thanks.
Hey guys, Steve Moran here.
Adam, welcome. I'm so excited about having this conversation today. Let's actually start by just talking a little bit about your organization, who you are, what you're doing, and then we'll sort of dig into what makes for a great senior living company.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Always have enjoyed our conversations and was reminiscing the other day about our first interview, which was right after I launched the company when you interviewed me in a WeWork in Chicago.
That's right.
Yeah. So, that was when it was all still a white paper. So we've come a while since then. It's been 6.5 years. So I launched April 1 of 16. We've weighted very heavily to development to date. So we've opened 3 developments. We opened Denver, November 20th, 2020, right out of the pandemic. We opened Evanston, Illinois, November 2021. We opened Kensington, Maryland, December 2021, and we're opening Austin, Texas, in July or August of this year. Vegas will open early next year, and then we'll break ground on 2 projects by the end of the year: Sarasota, Florida, and Paoli, Pennsylvania. And then we've done 2 acquisitions. One in Clearwater, Florida, was our first acquisition. Then we did one in Williamsburg, Virginia. Common thread there is we bought from local owners in both cases where it was their only asset in the space. And then we've done third-party management for a large institutional investor on a new property that they have here in Denver. So we develop, we operate, and we invest. We're continuing to look at opportunities today, both on development and acquisitions. We've got a pretty big pre-development portfolio, which is very exciting. Continuing kind of with the theme of, urban infill, first ring suburbs, very hospitality driven offerings, and then also looking at expanding through acquisitions.
So I want to actually explore. Actually, let me ask one question just to lay the foundation. So, independent living, assisted memory care.
Correct. Yeah. So our preference is independent assisted and memory care on one campus. So Evanston, Illinois, Kensington, Maryland, Sarasota, all have the full continuum. And then we'll also pursue assisted and memory care only. But I think that the what you would find if you were to tour those properties of ours that we've developed is that the assisted looks exactly like independent living, except it's licensed. So we don't treat them any differently. Like larger units, we have really great amenities, multiple dining venues, wellness spaces, lots of outdoors. So things that typically have been reserved only for independent, we introduce into our assisted living designs.
I was actually at a Watermark building in Napa that's a fairly new open, and they've done the same thing. And their assisted living our units are a little bit smaller, but they're still huge. And their independent living apartments are, I know they're big, much bigger than what I lived in as a student. I mean, they were beautiful. So I got to get out and see one of your buildings.
I would love that, Steve. We would love that. I know the team would be very excited if you ever wanted to tour any of the properties.
Yeah, I actually think I'm going to be. I'm not 100% sure, but I think I'm going to come to Pioneer Network in end of July, I think, which is in Denver. So so that would be really fun to do. So you're sort of I don't know whether you're exactly bucking the trend, because I will say there are a lot of I still see there's a lot of development pipeline that's happening, but even before the pandemic, we were seeing occupancy numbers decline. Of course, they took this, fall off the cliff drop through the pandemic. And while we're starting to see some improvement, it's certainly not back even up to pre-pandemic levels. Sounds like you sort of have an optimistic view that you can beat that trend.
Yeah. I mean, the two properties that we've acquired are both over 95% occupancy. So they maintain between 95 and 100%. The first development we did, again, we opened November 20th, 2020, is over 90% occupancy.
Wow.
And then our leasing on the properties we opened in the fourth quarter are both ahead of, one is right at budget, one is well ahead. And then our pre-leasing on our Austin property is extremely, extremely strong. And then we have the one deal we third party managed. We took over in December 2020. It had some challenges and a big COVID outbreak. And so we've seen occupancy lift there. We're in the high 70s, but that's our lowest occupancy property, is the one that we don't own, the one that we didn't build, but actually is a great team, and very optimistic about that. Where we've had some challenges has been, the staffing side. We're operating at wages that are well ahead of what we thought we would be at. And then in some of the, not in the development deals, actually, we're doing a great job without agency. We have a no agency mandate in development, because the truth is, if you take even the financial piece out, it impairs your quality, it impacts your reputation. I personally believe that there's a strong corollary between agency and future claims. And we do deal with agency a bit in the non-developed portfolio, but we're constantly focused on ways that we can eliminate it. It's the biggest area of focus we have. But yes, we're very bullish if the property is in the right location, if it's thoughtfully designed, and if you can, from day one, build the right brand, or if it's a distressed opportunity that you're stepping into through management or acquisition, if you can turn it around and restore the reputation through bringing the right leadership team into the community, or through providing the right support to the existing leadership team. So not every asset in the whole industry is gonna excel. There's going to be properties that are going to close their doors. They're going to have to be restructured. But if you're buying or you're building the right markets, the right offering, yes, I remain very bullish on the industry.
Okay, so I have so many things I want to ask you about. I'm going to take a little bit of a detour before I get back to. I do want to spend I think probably the bulk of the time I'm really interested in talking to you about your philosophy, work culture, philosophy. But there's this idea that I have in my head, and I don't know whether this is right. I kind of believe that if the deal is right, that every property can be successful. I'm going to caveat that a little bit, that if you went and built 200 units in Bishop, California, which is a little town in the Eastern Sierras, for those of you who don't know, it's got a population of 5,000 people. You probably couldn't fill that up no matter what you did, even if you gave the units away. But that in most markets, the problem is really programming and financing. Thoughts on am I too optimistic?
So we are very disciplined and patient in our growth. We focus on properties that really align well with our brand strategy. So you're not going to see us um, managing, acquiring properties that are in tertiary markets, um, properties that are, really more appealing to like an affordable demographic,
Right.
um, and properties that, a 40, 50 unit asset. So we stay focused on what we do well. Okay. Which is really primary markets, large secondary markets, 100 units or greater. What I would say is this, it's very challenging because of operating leverage. Okay. To generate margin when your rates don't hit a certain threshold. Okay. So if you have an assisted living property, memory care property, and you look at the rates and they're getting, let's just say 3,000 a month for AL, they're getting 4,500 for memory care. You could have run that with some margin when wages were 10, 12 bucks an hour. Now with escalation, inflation, wages, where gone are those days, and now let's just say you're $15 plus. A lot of markets you're $17 plus, and it takes a lot of staff to provide the right quality of care to the residents, and so there's just a certain cost to run the properties. So yes, if you're buying it right or you're building it right, it should solve a lot of issues, but still you have a lot of operating leverage. So there's just some properties that it's going to be very difficult to generate yield margin unless there's some kind of government reimbursement, or Medicare Advantage dollars that can supplement what people can pay privately.
Yeah, and I think there are different operating styles, right? So there's a guy who's a friend of mine here in the Sacramento area who local operator tends to run lower end buildings, but his operating style is very different. He runs very nice places, but they're probably not, and it would be really tough for him to run in that style in buildings, even in Denver, let alone in Florida, because of the travel costs and the time differences and all those kinds of things. And so I think some buildings are just better suited for local operators who can do a really nice job. Okay, so I want to shift to culture.
Yes.
You talk more optimistically than perhaps anybody I've ever talked to in recent history. I mean, I haven't actually asked you about staff turnover, but it sounds like you are more or less doing okay with your staffing, and which would suggest you're doing things differently.
Okay, so I think more about staffing than anything, and when I say that, I think more about the whole talent equation, attracting talent, training, development, developing, and engaging. That the four prongs. I will say that the first piece of it is getting the wage correct. So you have to be able to compensate your frontline team members fairly, and you have to get that right first. The rest doesn't matter, if you can't get that right. So we look in all our markets. We're assessing what our competitors are offering. We look to see outside of senior living and what good operators are offering frontline wages, and we make sure that we are offering a fair competitive wage. Then once you get beyond that, now you've got to retain people. And so how do you do that? There's no silver bullet. But there are a lot of variables that factor into high retention. So having good leadership and good leadership retention. I'm really proud of the stat. We have of all of our development properties, every executive director that was on our pre-opening team, which usually we hire about 10 months before opening, is with us today. We've not turned a single executive director in our development portfolio. In our first acquisition, our executive director has been with us for 4+ years. The second acquisition we did, the executive director was there pre-acquisition, is still with us. We have one deal that we have where we've unfortunately had a change in management, executive director, but he has been with us, I think, for like 5 months now, and he's doing an amazing job. We very much focus on spending the right time up front, getting the right people, and then supporting them and retaining them. So you have the right leadership team that flows down, executive director, into department managers. I have the same views on my department managers, is that you hire the right people, you support them. Not everyone's going to succeed. You're not going to have perfect retention, but we're going to way outperform the industry. All right. And then you have a culture, and that culture has to be your most valuable asset. So we have our 4 values: compassion, creativity, communication, commitment. And then every building has the values and the definitions of the values, and that is sacred. And that is that we can never sacrifice on our values. It starts at the top, the support team, the corporate team, filters down to the management team, filters down to the frontline team members. Recently, we started doing these surveys. We started working with a company called Go Happy. We're doing these surveys. It's actually through text. The participation, adoption of frontline team members is very high. And it's a 1 to 5 rating on a bunch of questions, like, would you refer somebody to work at property X, as an example. There's a bunch of questions, and then there are comments, which is probably where I go first. The qualitative aspect of it, seeing, what's working, what's not, and taking that feedback really seriously, Steve, and actually, holding ourselves accountable and making sure that, we're not discounting it, disregarding it, but we're actually taking action based on what we're hearing from our frontline team members.
So so many places to go with this. I mean, you're speaking my language. I'm not sure whether you're aware, but WD-40 has got some of the best culture scores, those kinds of things you're talking about, in the whole world. And the CEO is a guy by the name of Gary Ridge. I'm just about halfway through his book. I've actually got him coming on as a guest on Foresight TV in August. And we're going to be talking about these things. But I want to talk a little bit more about the executive director, because I think one of the first thing is that when I talk to operators, as I go to conferences, every operator out there, regardless of what you think of them, every operator out there has a few really, really good buildings. And when you sit down and you talk to them, it all comes down to not the market, not the pricing, not even the programming. It comes down to a great executive director. And my experience is that in most cases, when there's a building that is underperforming, it's because their executive director is not doing so great. The challenge that I hear from people is, I don't know how to find better executive directors, and yet you've got one in every building. So how does that work out?
Well, so we spend a lot of time searching for the right person. And we don't settle. We make sure that we're properly vetting people up front. I wouldn't hire an executive director unless I talked to somebody that they worked with in the past that I know that can give them an endorsement and speak to what they did successfully in their past life and why that's going to translate over to working with us. So when I say, like, our executive directors are often closely held, they're referrals, references from people within our network. And then we make sure once they join our organization that we treat them extremely well. We understand what motivates them, and we give them opportunities to grow, whether that could be like growing professionally. It could be growing, in terms of career advancement. It could be making an impact in an organization, because all of our executive directors, they're shaping who we are as a company. They have a front row seat. They can text me, email me, call me, and tell me, anyone on our leadership team, what it is that we need to do to be a better company. Their voice matters in our organization. Now, maybe that's due to our size today. As we scale, as we grow, we need to maintain that. But we place so much value in that individual and how important they are in the success of their operation. Now, we've hired, of all our executive directors, we did hire one from outside of the industry. He was in the hotel industry. He's actually opening a development of ours. I was advised against that by a few people who I trust, just to kind of gut check, like, is this a good idea or a bad idea?
Yeah. Yep.
But he has a great reputation in hospitality, and we made sure that we found a very strong leadership team. So experienced team, especially in the clinical department, with our nurse and then our memory care director, and our head of health and wellness for our company is providing more support to him and to that team, knowing that it's not his domain. It's not his area of expertise. So that's a win. We have another example of someone internally in the company that we have a few people in the company we've identified that are not executive directors. One who's a business office manager, one who's actually in sales, who are passionate about ops, who we want to help gain exposure to operations so that they could ultimately move into that role. And, for us, our size of a company, we can invest in people that way. We identify the high performers, and then we can put them on a career track. We're going to be promoting somebody internally into a leadership development training role, which is separate from HR. HR, in my view, there's HR compliance, like employee relations. There's all the tactical side of HR, payroll. Then there's the proactive side, the fun side of HR. Usually, one person is really strong, passionate in one, not in another. So we're taking somebody out of ops and we're going to put them in a training, development, leadership role to support the communities, because this is such a big focus for us.
So I worry that you're a bit too modest, because you've taken over some buildings where you inherited executive directors, and it sounds like, with one exception, you've been able to turn those into great executive directors. So we talk about recruiting problem in senior living, and I just don't think that we actually have that big a recruiting problem. I think the problem is almost entirely a retention problem, because as you talked about earlier, some turnover is actually healthy, right? Sometimes you need to let people go because they're not a right fit. Sometimes they're not competent. Sometimes you have people who you move on because they've grown outside the role and you don't have a place for them. Sometimes you're hiring high school kids or college kids to do things in your dining room, and they're going to go off and change the world someplace else. And those are all really healthy kinds of things. So I'd like to actually dig a little deeper into how you nurture, how you take care of, how you unleash your executive directors.
Yeah, it's a great question. We provide a lot of hands-on support. So our structure today, we're a small company. We've got a operator, VP of Ops, regional operator that's over development, and then we have one that's over what we call our classic portfolio. So non-developments.
Yep.
So we're very hands-on. And then the additional support structure that we have is also very hands-on in our communities, visiting communities and supporting our teams with what they need to be successful. I think that one of the things that is probably in my DNA from being around this industry for my whole life. I grew up in this industry.
Yep.
My dad started a company. I would go to properties when I was a kid on the weekends. I'd walk into the kitchens. I'd make mini donut holes with the cooks. I'd walk around the dining rooms, talk to residents. So I've been exposed to this business my whole life. And then I was on the capital side with Merrill, and then family business for 9 years before I started my own. So I have very strong views on what it takes to run a successful operation. But the most important thing to me, this has never changed, never deviated from it, is just talent and culture. So it's very easy to get into a habit in this industry of hiring quick. Resume, we have a position, it's vacant. We're all, we're overwhelmed. The business office manager is the interim ED. Like it's a pressure cooker. We need to fill this seat.
Yep.
It's the wrong approach. You have to be patient and find the right person. Then when you make that commitment to somebody, you're gonna face adversity at times. You're gonna face adversity. I can pretty much tell you about instances of adversity with a lot of people that I have my best relationships with in this company and in my past life. So the art is in supporting people through adversity and being able to assess, is this somebody who has a good work ethic? There are certain things I don't waver on. Do they have a good work ethic? Do they care about the residents? Do they care about the families? Do they care about the team members? Do they act with integrity? Are they a good person? I'm looking at that and assessing that and making sure this is a person that I want to put my time, and I want the team to put their time into making this person succeed, overcome whatever adversity it is that they're facing. The hardest variable is if somebody has a good work ethic, if somebody acts with integrity, but they don't have the skill set. They're in the wrong seat. Unfortunately, I have dealt with that a few times in my career. Those are the ones where, honestly, it just eats me alive. And I lose sleep at night. And I ask myself what else I can do. Sometimes sometimes you've done everything you can. You've coached them, you've supported them, you've given them resources, but they're still not succeeding, and it's gonna be time to part ways. But having this methodical approach to supporting and developing talent has to be ingrained in your culture. And there's a lot of capital that puts pressure on you. I'm not going to blame capital, but there are a lot of we are lucky. We have great capital partners. And I spend a lot of time making sure we align with partners that care about people and care about culture and care about providing quality services. Okay. But there's a lot of capital partners that they lose sight of that. And they look at the P&L and they say, well, we're not hitting budget. We're running high agency. We're missing on occupancy. We're missing on rate. Well, put that person on a performance improvement plan, give them 30 days, and if they don't succeed, terminate them. So I feel for operators out there that are getting that pressure, and candidly, they need the job, or the operator needs the business to stay solvent and to make payroll. For us, we're methodical in our growth, and we've had some partners that we've shifted away from since I started the company, but I am so fortunate. We have some great capital partners, and they want us to be successful. They value what we say. They respect us. And so while we have healthy dialogue, they know that culture is important, and they support us. If I say, or our team says, we need to help this person right now before we are ready to determine if we're going to make a change.
Well, and I would add that the bad capital that you described is, in my view, always short-sighted. I just don't believe that ever works to generate the highest returns. Sometimes things don't work. Sometimes things get delayed. But if you turn over people, there was a market, and I've written about this in the past, where the market conditions changed. Two buildings that were way more inventory than the market could handle. One had a really smart operator, didn't churn the executive director, recognized that the problem was the wrong product in the wrong time. The other building, almost identical size, they would do exactly that churn. And 2 years into these two developments, the one where they hung in there was had a 50%. They were still both low, but one was at like 35%, and the other one was at 70% because they took a long view on it. And so the people who were turning over, their cost was actually much higher in making those turnovers. But one more thing I want to say about you is, I think that, and I've seen this with really great operators before, and it warms my heart, actually. I don't think you give yourself enough credit, because you would acknowledge for sure that bad operators, bad owners can take a good executive director and drag them into the dirt, right? We know that happens. I think that you're the opposite of that. I think you take and find ways to pull out the best in executive directors that might otherwise be not extraordinary, and you turn them into extraordinary because you set the stage for that to happen. And it's how I run my business. I've got so many flaws, and I've hired people to pick up those flaws so that we do a better job. And each one of the people who works for me has got their own quirks and their own weaknesses, and we figure out how to take advantage of the stuff they're really good at, and we cover that other stuff in different ways. And that's what I hear from you. And I just, my heart is just warmed when I have so much admiration for what you're doing. I think if we had you leading the world, they'd probably, every single of senior living, if you could just be CEO of all of them, they'd probably be all full and low turnover.
I don't know about that. There's a lot of people I respect out there.
Yeah, I absolutely. There's some great operators. We're actually out of time, but I want to ask you two quick questions. Yeah. What are you reading?
Well, I'm in between books right now. The last book I read was The Premonition by Michael Lewis, one of my favorite authors, and it's probably a little close to home for a lot of people in our space, because it's about COVID and how we could have seen the warning signs, and we could have made some smarter decisions early on to see this coming and prevent the spread. It's very, very, very thoughtfully written. So I enjoyed that. And I'm always looking for new books that typically I'm reading a business book. So something that gets me to, prompts me to think. And I love leadership and strategy is typically where I'm spending my time.
It's actually interesting. I've sort of crossed my mind over time, but maybe we ought to do a virtual book club and just take a book and spend some time talking about it and growing with it together. And then the last question I have, and you sort of already talked about it, so I'm going to just hit it real briefly. Is what is it that you're just kind of thinking about right now? What's sort of your top of your mind?
Yeah, I'm always thinking about what we can do to solve the staffing challenges. How we can better attract and retain people. I'm always pushing myself in terms of design and how we can improve the appeal of our offerings. I say this over and over. Historically in the industry, people said, executives said, I would never live in one of our buildings. And I made a commitment that we would only build and operate places where we actually want to live, or we'd be proud to have our loved ones live. And that shapes a lot of our thinking at Solera. I think a lot about tech, what technologies will help us be a better industry. AI, robotics. Those are probably two of the big areas front of my mind. Burnout is something, it's tough. I feel it. I've dealt with a lot of fatigue, and fortunately have good mechanisms like yoga that help me overcome that. Golf, I love golf. Skiing, my kids, that help me overcome that. And then I just say, broadly, just what's going on in the world. Like I gotta end with this. What happened this week. It's such a tragedy, and it should never happen in America.
Yep.
And I honestly wish I was at a place in my career where I could take a stronger position on this. It's risky, obviously, right? We posted on social media, and our thoughts and prayers are with everybody who's been impacted. But I wish I could even take a stronger position, because we need change.
Yep.
And it's not okay. No kid should ever die.
That's
And
right.
no parent should ever be a fear of sending their kids to school and worrying that they won't see them at the end of the day.
Yep.
So, I'd say that, we're in a crazy place in the world with Russia, China. There's a lot going on in the world. And I hope that, I just hope the world is, we work through some of these issues, and we all, can find some common ground.
Yep. Adam, thank you very much. This has been amazing, and thank you for watching. Appreciate your support. Appreciate your heart for making the world a better place for residents, for people who work in the industry. And with that, we are out for this week.